感谢主，我们今天早晨集中在耶利米书的一段道理。
So thank God. This morning I'd like to study with you a passage that's located in the book of Jeremiah.
那是记载在耶利米书18章的，那神叫耶利米下到那窑匠的家里去。
It's a
那
story
一段道理。
that's recorded in Jeremiah chapter 18, of which God told Jeremiah to go down to the potter's house.
我们做一个信徒，在查考圣经的时候，
So being a member, so as we study the Bible,
我们得知道它这个主题在这怎么的描写出来。
we need to understand the main thing that was portrayed,
尤其有关神的话语，
especially messages regarding God.
因为它涉及到那个历史跟当代历史跟超越时空的一个普遍的真理。
Because when you read the truth, it has the historical past as well as the future meaning.
那我们不是只单在字眼上来了解，
Now we cannot merely dwell on the word
因
and the
为
meaning,
它有文字、语言
because there's the meaning behind it and also the words,
还有它的文学
and also the theology, literary,
还有它的历史的层面，
and also the historical
再加上
backgrounds.
很重要的新旧约的神学道理。
So there's a theology that comes from the New and Old Testament
那我
behind it.
们假定结合这几个层面，
So once you can combine all these
那我
together,
们对这个文本，就是书里头所教训的这个话语，
and then you will, and once again, you look at the meaning and what it's trying to teach us.
然后我们就进到它的为何或它如何的把这个主题把它彰显出来。
Then we'll be able to enter into the main theme that the Bible is trying to tell us behind it.
那这个叫 context。
So that's the context
那
of
我
the
们在
word.
text 跟 context 检查当中呢，
So when examining between the word and the
我们
context,
就可以查验到神在历史上以及他今天的旨意是什么。
you'll find out the word of God, whether it was from the past or today.
所以这段的经文对我们今天在灵修或者释放方面都有很大的帮助。
So this passage has a great help to us, whether it's spirituality
那
training
用
or
这样的
spiritual faith.
用这样的了解，
When you can take such understanding,
那我们就进入到圣经里头那神的话语的层面。
then we have gone into the words of God. in
所以
the
单
Bible.
单查考这耶利米书18章的有关这个窑匠家里这个动作，
So if today you merely study Jeremiah chapter 18, which is the story of the potter,
那我们应该把它串联在那个神的旨意。
we need to connect it with the will of God.
那为什么有这样的象征的动作？
Now, why is it that such action was taken? Symbolic action was
那
portrayed.
这个象征动作，意思就是说，神叫先知来扮演或者说操演一个动作。
Because today, God first asked this prophet to take on a role,
那他有他的，就是神的旨意隐藏在里头。
and God's will is right in it.
那他在做这动作当中，旁观的这些百姓或者先知本身，就可以察觉到神为什么叫他做这个动作。
So by doing so, the observer that can either be himself or the people will understand the truly meaning behind it.
那神的旨意就在其中了。
And there he will find the will of God.
那你要是查考圣经有关的这个象征动作，
Now, if you find all these symbolic actions that's recorded in the Bible,
前面一段大部分神叫先知扮演这个动作本身，
now it composes the introduction which God will tell this prophet to be a certain
其中有
being.
他的虚迹性，
And then there will be the dramatic
有
effect,
他的动作跟他的含义。
his actions and its meaning behind it.
然后在第二段，神就会自己的出口来下评论
And in the middle of the phrase, God will come out and critique.
所以叫 divine commentary 那这样的神的评论，就其实要彰显他的对百姓的要求。
From his commentary, you will find his expectation of the people.
那这样说来，我们在读那一段的象征动作，
So that being said, when we read the symbolic
我们都
action,
看到神叫百姓或者叫先知为什么来进入这个动作。
you will find out the reason why God will tell a group of people or the prophet to
那
do a certain
第二部
thing.
分，神就会昭示他的旨意了。
Secondly, then he will reveal his will behind
那我
it.
们再从他这个单一的这个经文里头再看，比如说耶利米书，它的主旨是什么？
Now, if you take this certain passage and compare it to the whole central theme of
那再
Jeremiah,
看它的时期是一个鲁放时期，就圣殿要被毁灭那个时期。
and then you look at the history of time being behind it, of which they were being ruled,
那么神给的意象，
and then the visions that God has given,
神的话语，
and his words,
或者叫先知所扮演的这个象征动作，
and the symbolic action that was given to
就
Jeremiah,
充满了有相当深沉的意义在里头。
then you put everything together, you will have a deep meaning
那
behind
不
it.
仅对当代百姓，
Not only to the people back
而且
then,
对今天的信徒，
and also to us today,
同样具有这样很重大的神学意义在里头。
it has a very deep and profound theological
所
meaning.
以用这样的了解，我们就来查验这个耶利米书18章。
So putting such things in perspective, let's study 18 of
第一个，
Jeremiah.
我们要分这4点来说。
First of all, I'd like to break them down into 4
第一点，我们
points.
问说耶利米的中心体旨中心的道理体旨在哪？
So first question I'd like to ask you is, what is the central point or theme of
那
Jeremiah?
第二段，那说神为什么叫先知下到来那个窑匠的家里？
Second point is, why did God instructed Jeremiah to go down to the potter's
那
house?
当然，这里头就象征动作本身的一个描写。
Now, of course, you'll find a direct portrait of the symbolic
那
action.
第3点，
Thirdly,
神所加注的所提出的这种他的评论、他的旨意的要求。
now you will find the critique and commentary of God and His
那
expectations.
这样的话，我们也可以看到神为什么讲这些话。
And then you'll find out what exactly was His reason behind it.
那到了第4点，到最后了。
Fourth and last,
我们就可以看这个信息对当代以色列民有什么重要的警戒，或什么样的劝勉，或什么样的督责。
we'll find out the important meanings or cautions behind it to the people of Israel.
而且这像反过来说，对今天神的信息是什么？
And on the other hand, what is God's message to us today?
那我们当作神选民的一份子，
So being a chosen people of
我
God,
们就可以真正很切身的体验到这句话或这
we can
段
truly, clearly understand what is the meaning behind this
这段经
passage
文
and the words.
所以这一段不但在我们灵修
So these passage or context not only apply to
或
our
在侍
spirituality
奉所要神的工作的方向，
or in terms of our servitude towards God,
而且我们可以从神的话语知道他的历史旨的那个作为跟旨意。
so from the words of God we can understand the history and His will
那我们
behind
可以
it.
得到很大的那个晨钟暮鼓的那个作用。
So by doing so, we could greatly be edified, inspired from it.
好，我们现在来看耶利米书
So let's turn to Jeremiah chapter 18.
耶利米跟以西结都属于公元前第6世纪的先知。
So both Jeremiah and Ezekiel exist in 6 BC.
这2大先知在这个以色列的先知传统上来说，是占着举足轻重的地位。
So these two major prophets has played a great role in the history of prophets in
因
the
为
kingdom of Israel.
他们的信息
Because the messages they
是
brought
有关当时以色列民族的信仰跟他们的国运息息相关的。
has direct relationship with the future of the kingdom and how they were doing in terms of their faith.
Nation of Israel and the faith.
The nation of Israel and their faith.
那所以这样说来，我们可以看出说他的信息有当代的意义。
So that being said, we can see a certain importance and
所以
meaning
不
of the
管是
message.
耶利米和以西结，
So whether it's Ezekiel or Jeremiah,
他们所处的时代
the time they were in,
都有一个共通性，
they have one similarity.
就是说已经到了最后的末代王朝。
It's because they both existed at the end before the kingdom was destroyed.
意思就是说已经到了列王记下24章、25章那个当的时候。
So it's right about at the end of 2 Kings chapter 25 and 26.
24、25。
28 to 25.
那这样说来，我们可以看到他信息就是面对的时代的挑战，
So that being said, they direct their message towards the challenge of the
百
society
姓应该有什么的反应。
and how the people should react.
那假定说该来的就来，
For example, what is to come
那
will
就是
come.
就是神所要预定的神的审判，
And what is to come is the judgment of God
对罪民的一个刑罚。
and the punishment towards the sinful
但
people.
神不愿意看到他的百姓的沉沦，
However, God did not want to see their people
所以在他们
fail.
信息这审判的这个信息之外，还有一个很重要的神慈爱的拯救。
That's why apart from the judgmental message, there's also the delivery and salvation of God.
所以这样说来，你看到公义审判跟神的慈爱拯救，
So that being said, you see the righteous judgment and His merciful salvation.
成为我们在查考旧约圣经神的救赎的最重要的两端。
Has become the two ends of our salvation, of our study towards the salvation of God in the Old Testament.
那这样说来，神的信息那我们在先知书里可以发现这两方向。
So that being said, within the book of prophets, you will find these two ends in it.
一方面一定是因为百姓的犯罪，
One end is because the people have sinned against
那
God.
神就倾倒他的烈怒
Therefore, God will pour out His wrath,
然后就处罚他的百姓。
and the people will be punished.
那当然这是神的咒诅，
And of course, this is a curse of
被
him
记载在申命记很清楚的。
because it's clearly recorded in the Bible.
那另外在百姓经过一番苦难以后，
And after the people have suffered,
那他们在宗教情操跟宗教的意识上操练以后，
after they've been trained religiously in terms of their faith,
那他们有个觉醒，就所谓的宗教的觉醒。
so they made a religious awakening.
那在圣经里头很重要，叫做回归，回头转向，归向神这个动作。
So that's why they have turned back and returned
所以
to
这
the
个
face
是
of
他
God.
们的反悔，或者他们的那个回归到神，很重要一个关键。
So this is a key concept and key point as they have repented and returned to the face of
所
God.
以说神就施出他大能的膀臂来拯救他们，来救助他们。
Then God stretched out his arm of mercy to save them.
那所以说，我们从耶利米和以西结这个中心信息，
So from this central thing that shared between Jeremiah
不
and
断的
Ezekiel,
浮现出来，
something that will show up
使
continuously.
当代或以后百姓念到这段文章或神的这个警戒和神的劝慰的时候，
So whenever the people, whether it's back then or today, read upon this warning of God,
他们可以就是跟神的要求，或跟他们自己的作为，做一个很深层的一个反省或者
so
检
in
讨。
terms of their relationship or the requirement of God, they could once again ponder and re-examine
所以
themselves.
经过悔改回归以后，他们才复兴了，
So after have returned and repented, they have revived the nation.
才有圣殿的重建、信仰的复兴。
Then there was the reconstruction of the temple
这
and
个
their faith.
这个也是我们从旧约所学到的。
So this is what the Old Testament history
那
has
么现
taught
在
us.
就来看耶利米书18章，
Now let's study Jeremiah chapter 18.
这个是一个很重要的象征动作。
Now this is a very important symbolic action.
意思就是说，神嘱咐或者吩咐这个先知做一个动作
So what that means is God has instructed the prophet and the people to do something.
那这个动作本身有代表的意义或者象征性的意义
What that action has is a symbolic meaning.
所以说你看动作来查验它深藏注定那意义在哪。
That's why we look at the action itself and find out what is symbolic
那
meaning
在圣
behind
经
it.
里头有不少的，尤其在先知书里头有不少的那象征动作。
Now in the Bible there are many symbolic meanings that's recorded, especially in the
我
book
们
of
我们
Proverbs.
可以举几个例子。
For example,
我们先来看那个以西结书的第4或第5章啦。
let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 4 or 5.
那第4章有关围城，就是说巴比伦军队要来攻打那个耶路撒冷圣城。
And chapter 4 talks about how the city of Jerusalem was sieged by the
那
Babylonians.
在这个攻打还没有发生以前，神就叫这个以西结先知来做一个动作，
Now before this war took place, God instructed Ezekiel to do an action.
叫他在砖头上头画城墙，画那个耶路撒冷圣城，
He said to draw the walls of Jerusalem on top of a
然
brick,
后叫他拿着这个铁锤，
and to take a hammer
当着撞锤这样的来撞打这个城门口，
and to hit it against the walls of the city,
而且围困在圣城的周围。
and to surround these around the city.
那他要躺在砖头的左边、右边若干的10日的。
And he will lie on either side of the brick for
那
about 10
那
days.
表示说，这巴比伦军队将来要来围困这个城。
That itself symbolizes that one day the city will be sieged.
那他的这个举动也表示，将来巴比伦军队要用大铁锤来撞破这个城门。
And the action of him hitting against the brick which symbolizes one day the walls of the city will be
那
breaking down.
就在这个时候，神就叫先知，那你要叫分配粮食配给，因为当时没有粮食了，就要配给。
Then God instructed him to pass out the food to the
然后
people.
呢，他要用牛粪或者人粪当做肥料来烧烤面包。
Now he's to use the waste of man or animals and to cook it as bread.
这对以色列民来讲，和对祭司、对圣洁民族来讲是不可能做的事情，一个
So-
污秽的作为。
So to the holy nation, especially the priests, it is something unacceptable and they will never do.
但是敌人围攻了，哪有圣洁的那个作为可言呢？
But when they're under siege and attacked by the enemies, such things are nowhere to be
那
found.
而且呢，先知神叫他说拿着碗，战兢兢的喝着，要随时看着，好像马上要逃命的感觉。
And he also instructed them to hold on to your bow and be very, very watchful, for you should be fleeing.
所以
anytime.
先知做些动作，百姓看在眼里头。
So all this symbolic action the prophet was doing was observed by the
那
people.
所以这圣经就说，好做以色列家的预兆。
So the Bible says it will serve as a warning and a sign for the house of Israel.
那第5章，那先知神就叫先知以西结，
Then in chapter 5 again, God instructed Ezekiel.
本来做祭司的，他不刮胡须的，他不理的。
Now originally being a priest, he does not shave.
但是神叫他刮，就是刮除他的头发跟胡须。
Now in chapter 5, God told him to shave his hair and his beard.
这也是对祭司家庭的一个挑战，一个羞辱，但他一定要做。
A shameful things and a challenge for the house.
然后叫他剃下来的头发跟胡须切成3部分。
And told him that whatever hair you have gathered, cut them into 3 pieces.
一部分在城中里头用刀来砍碎。
One of the segment, you chop them up into pieces in the middle of the
那
city.
第二部分在城中用火来焚烧。
And you would burn the second segment in the middle of the city.
那第3部分就拿在手中来任风来吹散的飘。
And the last of the remaining, you will hold in your hand and let it be blown
这
away
个
by
就
the
是有
wind.
关巴比伦军队来围攻圣城、攻陷圣城的时候，
What that symbolizes is how the Babylonians will come and take over the
有
city.
部分人被刀屠杀，
Which means some will be killed by the
有些
sword,
人被火焚烧，
some will be burned to death,
有些人是流离四散，
where others will scatter all
已
over the
经是
earth.
亡国了，
Because the kingdom has been
城墙
destroyed.
陷落了，
They have been captured.
从此以后再没有政权了。
There will be no more anarchy, democracy,
sovereignty，
the sovereignty.
他们再没有这种圣殿的崇拜了，
Because they no longer have a temple to worship.
所以这是一个很悲惨的一个下场。
So it is a very, very pitiful
那为
ending.
什么神叫先知以西结扮演这些动作？
So why did God tell Ezekiel to do such a
就
symbolic
是
action?
含着一个时代的信息，
Because it has a history meaning
比如
behind
说
it.
神要利用外国的强大的军队，
Because God will utilize the foreign
当
powers
作神愤怒的拐杖，
As
愤怒
his
的
wrath
这
of
个
rod.
恼恨的杖，来击打他自己百姓。
and to utilize these foreign nations as a wrath of God
那
to
这个
hit
是
his own people.
这是令人的战栗不已的，这非常心惊胆战的。
So this is something that will cause a tremendous
所以
fear
这个
to
象
the
征动
people.
作，象征动作
So such a symbolic action
就会警戒百姓，
will bring warnings to
就
the
将
people,
要到的事，假定不再悔改，不再回头。
which to tell them that you will be punished
那
else you return.
刚才所扮演的这些动作就会发生了。
And then if you don't return, then whatever I have just done will happen one day.
从那代表性的、象征性的那个意义，变成实质上的一个动作。
From a symbolic which represents something which will later on become reality.
用这样的了解，我们也可以看到以赛亚书或者是耶利米书很多的先知的这象征的动作，
Of such concept, you will find such in symbolic action recorded
The-
in Isaiah
跟
and Jeremiah.
跟他们以色列家的那个信仰和他们的国运相系在一起。
So all these has a very close relationship with how the kingdom was doing.
那
in the
说
future.
到这个以后，我们就看耶利米书也很多的象征动作，其中的一个第18章。
So of course, chapter 18 of Jeremiah is also one of many symbolic actions that's recorded in the book.
从1节到第4节那里，
Starting from verse 1 to 4,
很简短的在描写
in a very short
耶
description,
利米顺着神的命令下到这个窑匠的家里。
how Jeremiah and how he followed the commandments of God, he went down to this potter's
那
house.
第3节他就看这个匠人或者窑匠他手中的操作。
So in verse 3, it's his observance of how this potter was playing with the clay.
你注意看第3节底下哈，
Let's read verse 3 carefully.
窑匠家里头这个窑匠做转轮，这个转轮做器皿。
So right here, he was observing him making something at the wheels.
我们只看这个中文，不知道有几个轮子哈。
So if you look at the Chinese, it doesn't tell you it's a
但这
wheel.
转轮在希伯来文是用双数，双数就是2个眼睛、2个手、2个的数目。
So in original Hebrew, it actually has the context of 2 wheels.
听说 I'm 的音了，比如说Mahanaim 这就2个军队Edaim 就2个手。所以要说一个字，你就知道是2个数目2个的这样的数目。
Which original word Hanyan or Idayo, which means 2 wheels or 2 hands.
马哈念
Mahaman.
马哈念所以说这个都是一看就知道是2个轮子，一个上一个下，一个竹子一个轴它撑着，它就在做转着在捏，在塑造这个器皿。
So as soon as you read this, you will know that it's actually a machine composed of a rod in the middle and 2 wheels up and down. And this is the tool that the
那
potter
他
uses to make the
所以
clay.
这种动作就是有一个，就是他看到器皿不成器，就把它捏碎了， 再重新捏的粘土，再拧作一团。
So one of the important action he observed was, as soon as this potter was not pleased with the clay, he will destroy it and make another one.
所以这是个破坏性的动作。
So this is a destructive action.
就是说，他的手可以捏土，而且不要把它弃绝。
Which means the hands of the potter has sole power to destroy and make something.
然后第二个动作，他再重新捏土的时候，看是好，好就好了。
So second action he observed was when the potter was pleased with the clay, he will keep it.
看怎么好就怎么好。
Whatever he sees is good, it's good.
就是他认为已经可以成立了，可以建立起来了，可以成型了。
Because to the potter, this clay is good to become a good vessel.
所以单一的动作里头，已经有耶利米先知里头很重要的两端的那个教训。
So as simple as these two actions, you will find these two great teachings
我
within
们
it
先来
already.
看耶利米先知被神呼召的时候，他所被付托的使命。
So let's recall when Jeremiah first was called by the God, what was entrusted to him.
大概在公元前627到626年他被神的呼召。
So Jeremiah was called by the Lord about 627 BC.
那他就要成为不但是以色列人，而且是列邦的先知。
Not only was he called to be a prophet of Israelite, he was also a prophet of the foreigners.
那当然他会推辞一番。
And of course, he rejected in the
他
beginning.
说我是年轻了。
He said, I'm a little too
但
young.
神跟他保证说，我跟你同在，我祝福给你，我给你口。
Yet the Lord promised him that I will be with you and give you the words of wisdom.
那时候你就去吧，把
So-
当我说的话传给你，你传给以色列民，传给外邦。
So just go and proclaim the words I will tell you.
那请看第10节
So let's read verse
这
10.
耶利米书1章的10节
Jeremiah chapter 1 verse
说
10.
看了我今日立你在列邦列国之上为了做什么呢？为了施行拔出、拆毁、毁坏、倾覆，这是破坏的动作。
So right here, all these being said, you can see the action of destroy and destruction.
他用拔出 uproot 就是拔出来，
To root out and pull down,
然后拆毁 demolish 然后再毁坏 destroy，
and to
整个这
destroy
个都是坏的动作。
and throw down. All these were actions of destroying of something.
这已经在指示神可以摧毁他所要建立的，
Which is to symbolize that God has the power to
甚
destroy
至
anything.
神可以丢弃他所拣选的立约的百姓。
Even he has the power to forsake these people he
这
has
是一
made
个
covenant
这个
with.
罪刑法神公义审判的这个一个信息
Now this is a message that you can find from the direct and righteous judgment of God.
就是跟针对神的百姓的罪，神就施行他公义的审判。
Which is to the people which sin against him, he
那
will
最后这
utilize
个
his
百姓
judgment.
国家或者崇拜的这样的代表性的圣殿或者摩西五经的规模就被拔出倾覆了。
So this temple, which symbolized the servitude towards God, will one day be uprooted or obliterated.
那另外呢，我们再看，你看神又要做一个，又要建立栽植，你去传这个神的拯救的信
And
息。
another thing that was given to him is to ask him to build and to plant.
那这一段的圣经，
So this particular
就
passage
是等于耶利米书的主题。
became the central theme of
他
Jeremiah
到列邦去，
when he goes to the
就
foreign
是表
land,
示说神要施行他公义的审判，
which after God has put out his judgment,
因为你们罪恶深沉，
for you have been so evil,
就是罪恶滔天了。
your sin has so much
神要
reached
拯
God in
救
heaven,
神要拯救，
because God wants to
因为
save
他
you.
本身是神这个守约施慈爱的神。
For he kept his covenant, he's also
那只
merciful.
要百姓回转，那他要施行拯救，
As long as people repented and turn around, his mercies
所
will
以要
abide.
建立栽植。
That's why he needs to plant and
那
build.
以后呢，你就从耶利米书可以看到这个信息不断的出现。
Now such message can be observed throughout Jeremiah.
第1章，
Chapter
等
1,
一下我们看这个18章的主题，
and if you look at the central theme of
或
chapter
者24
18,
章，
chapter 20,
甚至到最后到31章，
or even at the end till
大
31,
概6、7次，这个经文在重复说神要这耶利米先知传达的。
there was about 6 or 7 times that God wanted Jeremiah to alliterate this message.
那么18章就可以看到。
Now turn back to verse 18,
就
you
是
will
说
find
这个
out.
窑匠的动作本身已经含着，不但一方面是粉碎
Now these actions of potter not only does it carry the meaning of destruction,
那一方面又要重新捏造，让它成为一个成器
and
的。
also at the other hand, you will remake them into a vessel.
所以这个动作已经在不言而喻之中了。
So,
unspoken
unspokenly it was being carried out.
所以他就不得不说。那但是神马上就在我们看底下6节，
Then verse 5, God
这是神的评论啊。
Now this is the commentary of God.
因为神，你看你很多的象征动作头，一定有他要插入来讲解他的旨意。
So many times after God gives a symbolic action, He will follow by His
我们举
commentary.
一个例子，
For
比
example,
如说在以西结书37章那里，
in Ezekiel chapter 37,
第一段是描写神叫以西结先知看到平原上充满了这个死骨头，
originally He asked Ezekiel to look out into the field. It's filled with dry bones.
那就问说，人子啊，这些骸骨能复活吗？
Then He asked him, Son of man, can these bones be
那
revived?
人子这位以西结说，主啊，你是知道的。
And then he said, Son of man, Lord, you know it.
那神就说，好吧，你向这些骨头来发预言。
Then the Lord says, prophesies to these bones.
那发预言意就是说，先知讲话是传达神信息，你向他说啊，就传达神的旨意。
What that means is, you will speak to these bones what I will tell you.
那最后就有这个风从四方而来，
Then what follows is wind starts to blow in from four
当
corners.
然风也代表神的气息，
And of course, wind can represent the breath
也代
of
表
God
神的圣灵。
and also His Holy
那
Spirit.
吹到这些已经骸骨、死骨又死白又干枯的这个平原上的遍满的这样的骸骨的里头，
So when this wind blows onto this field, it's filled with dry bones which has been dry for many, many years.
一份那种苍凉、一种那种无望的那种感觉。
Now it gives you this sense of desolations and
但神叫
hopelessness.
先知传达他的信息，
Now God commanded the prophet to
而且
preach
这
His
样让
words.
主吩咐的从四方八面的这个风气息吹入到这个死骨头里头
And to
去。
command all these winds from four corners of the earth to blow into these.
那果然
field
就是说骨头就长上这种筋了，长上肉了。
Long before, these bones started to have veins and muscles
然后筋骨了、犀牛了啊，
and all the joints.
还有那这样以后就皮了，
And then the skin.
就站起来了，
And then he stood up.
就成为神的军队。
Finally became the army of God.
那这样的一个象征动作，以后马上跟着在大概11节那里。
Such a symbolic action immediately followed commentary.
那
verse
神就说：“你
11.
看啊，这些骸骨就是以色列家，
He said, then these are the whole household of
因
Israel.
为他们已经被掳放，流落四方。
For they have been captured
他们认为民族生机已经断绝，
because they think they have lost their nations.
他们认为自己已经进入到黑暗的这种恐怖的那坟墓里头
Because they thought they have entered into this dreadful and scary doom.
然后我就神说，我定义把他们从黑暗的坟墓里头引出来，
And so it is my will to pull them out of this dark
再
doom,
带领他们回到他们的故土，
to guide them onto the right
所以
path,
说让他们再建立、
so they can be reestablished,
重建圣殿、
to reconstruct the
复
temple,
兴信仰。
and to revive their faith.
这当然就进入到我们圣经所说的和历史所说的那必要圣殿的时期了。
So of course, by now we have entered into the second stage of
The rebuild center, and rebuild temple.
the reconstruction of the
我
temple.
们通常叫第二圣殿时期
So we call this the second phase of the temple,
，second temple 啊。
second temple.
那这个一直到主耶稣的时代为止，
And he lasts all the way till the
罗
time
马
of
变得
Jesus.
毁灭的70年代
And it's been destroyed for about 70 years.
那在这个 AD 70。好，这样说来，我们可以看神的解释，
So that being said, you will see the commentary
跟
of God
先知看的意象，
and the visions as
就是
viewed by
跟
the
以西结
prophet
看的意象，
and whatever
或者说
Ezekiel
先
saw.
知以耶利米所扮演的戏剧性的动作，
All this symbolic action Jeremiah
都
took
有
on.
神的旨意的昭告。
All these has God's will and calling
那么
behind it.
我们回到耶利米书看18章，神怎么说？
So let's turn back to Jeremiah chapter 18 and see
从
what God
这个
said.
捏土成为新团，成为器皿这个动作，神就做这样的注解。
So from this action of making the clay into a good vessel, God made such commentary.
那这一段也变成在旧约圣经里头很重要的一段，有关神的旨意跟人的作为。
So such statement also become a very important message in the Old Testament, which shows the will of God and the deeds of men.
你读这一章的耶利米18章，要跟以西结18章连接在一起，
Now, when you reach up to 18 of Jeremiah, you have to connect it with the 18 of Ezekiel.
因为这章神的旨意是针对着列邦、人列诸国。
Because within this message, God dwelt His point to the foreigners.
那在以西结18章，神针对的每一个个人。
In Ezekiel chapter 18, it was directly towards individuals.
不管国家也好，或者是个人也好，
So today, whether we're speaking as a nation or individually,
都有神要命定要栽植建立的那个爱的表现，
within it, we will still find the essence of rebuild and love of God.
或神大能拯救的这样的历史的昭告。
And His power of salvation.
但是同时呢，神也会倾倒出，而且会施展出他的公义，
But at the same time, He will pour out His judgment and His
他就
righteousness.
会因为罪关系来刑罚。
Because for the sake of sin, you will be
这
punished.
个列邦如此，
And the foreign nations
那
is no
以色
different.
列犹大国以后的从前以色列，今天的犹大国也是如此。
So the same thing happened to the king of Judah, and the same thing will happen to Israel.
先以色列
First Israel
140年前毁灭了，
It was destroyed 140 years before.
那独存幸存的犹大也不幸也被毁灭了，
And whatever is left behind, which was the kingdom of Judah, later was destroyed
这
as
是
well.
神的倾覆啊，
So
发出啊。
that's how God has obliterated.
那这样的话，我们在思考神在普天下列邦诸国当中他的绝对自主权。
So we can see the sovereign power of God that's ruling in all nations.
那在以西结18章那，
In Ezekiel chapter
这个
18,
国家或者列邦变成个人，
now this kingdom or nations has been transformed into
那每一个
individuals.
个人，神要建立栽植，
Now God will rebuild and plant
就好
every
像
individual.
神拣选门徒，或者安利在使徒。
Just like how God has chosen, Jesus has chosen the disciples
今天
and
他
apostles.
今天从各族各方各民各国来呼召他的百姓跪在他的名下，
Now today He has called everyone to come to His name from all nations around the world.
主宝血把他洗净，
That everyone was washed away by His
成为
blood
神的儿女。
to be called His
这是
children.
他的建立，他的栽植，他的招聚。
Now this is His own calling, planting, and rebuilding.
但是同时也可以注意到，
But at the same time, we must
不
focus
管是属这个地面上的王国，
whether this nation belongs to the earth
或者属灵的信仰团体，
or this passing out of spiritual faith.
虽然主耶稣选召，
Even though Jesus has
成为
called,
一个属灵圣灵的国度，
He become a spiritual nation.
但是神的公义原则还在那。
But His righteousness and His principle will still be there.
就是说你要不尽心尽性尽意尽力爱主你的神，
But our principle is, those you love Him with all your heart, mind, and soul.
你要是不这样的认真的谨守我的律例典章诫命，
Those you keep my commandments with all your totality.
那我的这个恩惠这个恩典的呼召，
Then my grace and my blessings and my call
那
to
本
you.
来要建立的栽植的，
Now originally it was planned to rebuild
那
and plant.
也就因为神的公义，也因为人的罪，神不得不施行他的审判，
Now because you have sinned and my righteousness, I will be forced to
所
force
以就
upon my
迁覆
punishment.
了，就拔出了，
And I have obliterated and uprooted
拆毁了。
to destroy.
再看犹大，
Now look at Judas,
本来就是加略人犹大。
the disciple of Jesus, Judas.
Iscariot，
Iscariot
那他呢，丢弃自己的这个殊荣，这个使徒的殊荣，
Now he has forsaken his privilege of being an
自
apostle.
己硬着心奔往这个灭亡的道路去。
Now he was stubborn and he went on this path of destruction.
所以神本来预定要栽植、建立他，甚至迎接他到荣耀的天国，
So originally it was planned for Jesus to plant and rebuild him and receive him into kingdom of
但是
God.
他自己认为不屑，罪恶迷心，
But he was deceived by sin and he was
硬心到
unworthy.
底，
He was stubborn
不
till the
肯
end.
悔改，
He refuses to
就
turn
奔往
back.
自己灭亡的道路。
Then he paved his own path
这
of
是
destruction.
个人哦，这是个人。
Now this is the
那
individual
这是
who
以
was
西
seeking.
结书的主题哦。
Now this is the theme of Ezekiel.
那以西结在说个人当中，
So in the book of Ezekiel, when
他
it talks
也
about
提到说
individuals,
恶人，神不喜悦他们灭亡的。
it talks about how the evils will be destroyed by
只要
God.
恶人他们在一生在中途能够弃恶从善，
Now the evils doers on the middle path, they could turn back
那么
and
在
repent.
他们弃恶从善变成善的那个日子，神就要拯救他们。
So the day when you return from evil to good is also the day of deliverance of God.
反过来说，义人
On the other hand, the
他们
righteous,
中途就是说行百里者半90，就是一半到90都会放弃的那些人。
now those who gave up halfway before they reach the goal,
那很可惜，他们在一生所有的积善，或者他们的这样的储蓄他们的德性，
and sadly and unfortunately, all these they have accumulated throughout the whole life.
但是就因为他们那根行恶，
It's because the evil deeds they have done.
那神就不纪念他们从前所行的善，
God will not remember what they have done
那
before.
神就放弃他们了。
and they will be forsaken,
拆毁他们。
be destroyed.
所以这样的话，就有一个神不喜欢恶人的死亡，
So that being said, God does not want any evil to
神
be
也不喜欢
doomed.
那个义人来离弃真道。
He also does not want any righteous to forsake
但
the truth.
万一人硬着心来顽梗对抗着神的旨意，
So if a man is stubborn and fight against the will of
我
God,
们通常用英文叫 apostasy， 这种背道，那神他是不得不下他公义的审判。
so if one opposes the truth of God, God will be forced upon to utilize his punishment and wrath.
那所以说这个信息就很清楚。
So the message was clear.
本来神预定要栽植的，要祝福的百姓。
So originally God planned to rebuild and plant his
那
people.
国家来讲以色列，
And the whole nation speaking is the king of
犹大
Israel
或者犹大，
or Judah.
但因为他们犯了双重的罪恶。
But because they have sinned against God greatly,
第一个方面就是有宗教上的亵渎神的罪。
the first thing they have committed is blasphemy against God.
那第二个就是因为他们在良心、道德、社会行为上的亏欠。
Secondly is they have fallen short of their moral standards,
比如说虚谎，
which means
来
hypocrites,
那
laziness,
或者说欺诈
or
或者是压榨
or to force upon the weak.
那这样说来，那他们就行了。这个以赛亚书、何西阿书、弥迦书，很多先知里所斥责的那种社会的不公义。
So by doing so, they have trespassed against what many of the prophet has said in
就
Isaiah
是说
and Ezekiel.
神的公义也要人秉公行义。
Then God's judgment and His righteousness will be
神是
performed.
圣洁的，也要他的百姓要成圣。
Because God is holy, therefore He requires the same
那
from
他
His
们
people.
跟列邦有分别，
Because there is a difference between them and
所以
other
他们要
nations.
归神为圣，
Therefore, they must observe the
而
God
且跟
as
世
holy
界有别。
and be separated from the world.
但是百姓犯了这样的很大的毛病。
So that's what the people have failed to do.
但当然，这个篇章很多，
Of course, you will find many recordings
就
of
说你
these.
们说这是神的殿，这是神的殿，这是神的殿。
Such recording by saying, for example, you call this is the temple of God.
但是神说你们要改正行为，
Yet the Lord will say, you need to
你
change
们
your
干
actions.
犯了这《生命记》第5章，或者是《出埃及记》20章所有的10条诫命。
Now you have just committed all these laws and regulations that's recorded in Deuteronomy and Exodus,
就说10条诫命。
the Ten Commandments.
那所以说，本来是神的圣殿，
Because originally this is the holy
会
temple
被
of
人
God.
误解说这是一个安全自由的地方了。
It was mistaken by others that's a place of
但没有
sanctuary.
想到，巴比伦军队马上就到，
But no one expected that the Babylonians
还
came,
以为是很安全、很自由，
and they still thought they were free and safe.
但没有想到把神的圣殿当作贼窝。
Surprisingly, they took the place of God as a house of thief.
那这样说来，就变成名不副实。
So that being said, they have turned away
那他们
upside
以
down
为
the truth.
他们以为有宗教就有一切，
So they thought by having this faith of religion, they
他
have
们以
everything.
为有了圣经、有了圣殿就有了一切，
They thought by obtaining the Bible and the Holy Temple, they have gained the world.
而且一个错误的虚幻的一个假象。
So this is a wrong misconcept.
不知道说外界已经这么危急，还在里头以为很平安，
One misconcept they had was because the danger was coming, they were still at peace.
而且呢，他们的行径不合神的旨意。
And on top of that, their actions were not in accordance with the will of
所
God.
以耶利米先知就在那个耶利米书第7章那里，
That's why Jeremiah in chapter 7,
那他数算百姓在良心道德上的，在神的律法上所犯的罪恶。
in chapter 7, you'll find how he counts how many sins he has committed in terms of their moral against God.
这个真的震撼人心，为什么呢？
So it really strikes our heart. And
因
why
为
is
有
that?
很多人就迷幻，你就有迷失，有迷惘，
Because a lot of us has lost ourselves.
以为说来聚会，
Because we think by coming
来
to
祷告
church,
说几句跟神交通的你听不懂的话
when we pray in tongue or speaking unknown language,
那就说好像安息日的圣徒一样。
we feel like we're observing the
但
truth
是
of God.
神看的是内心，
But what God looks at is your heart.
就好像撒母耳记上16章7节说，人看外貌，神看内心，
Just
不
like
看
what God
动作
said in First Samuel chapter 7, God looks at your heart rather than your deeds.
那这样说来，那神教以西结或是耶利米的先知的信息，
So this is the message that God portrayed through
都
Jeremiah.
归到一个原点，
Go back to the origin.
也就是说，以色列民为什么被毁灭？
What is the reason why the people of Israel was
不
destroyed?
是神的契约百姓吗？
Weren't they the covenant people
他
of
们认
God?
为是天之骄子，
Because they think they're the people of the world.
是真的选民。
They were the true chosen ones.
但是没有想到，神竟然弃绝他们。
But out of their expectations, they were forsaken by God.
这个叫做很大的反讽。
So that itself is a
great irony.
A great irony.
这是想不通，但是就在那里也是很大的讽刺了。
It's something that cannot be explained, but it happens.
所以外邦就笑，哈哈。跟以西结束就记着，哈哈，你们是神的百姓。
So in Ezekiel, you'll see how the foreigners will laugh at the people of God.
他们羞辱百姓。
They put shame upon
也羞辱神的圣名。
And also disgrace the name of God.
为什么
？Why did that happen?
为什么他们主权丧失，被巴比伦称来沦落为附庸国
？They have lost their sovereignty and become a slave.
那为什么他们没有以为骄傲的可以依归的这样圣殿？
Now, why is it that they were able to return back to the temple?
所以你可以看他们，比如说诗篇137篇那里。
So sometimes if you look at, for example,
他们在巴比伦河边
when they were sitting by the river Babylon,
就哭起来。
they cried out loud.
因为说俘虏他们的巴比伦家说：“你们唱西安歌吧。”
Because those who captured them told them to sing the hymn of
他
Zion.
说：“我们怎么可以在外邦唱起神的圣城的歌呢？”
So they were sad because how could they sing the Holy Son of God in
耶路撒
foreign
冷
land?
啊，耶路撒冷啊，这歌就唱出来，其实唱不出来。
So they cannot utter the words of Jerusalem.
所以他们这种亡国恨啊，没有办法用笔墨描写的。
So you cannot really write down how much hatred they have in words. The remorse in words.
那这种不但是这个国家，是整个信仰的规模啊。
So this is not only the whole nation, but this is a reformation of their faith.
你没有圣经，你没有崇拜的地方，你又被束缚，你又没有自由，你是怎么样掉眼泪都来不及。
Now today you don't have a Bible, you don't have religious freedom. Even your tears cannot describe
那
how
你
you are
就
going
会
through.
就说在痛苦当中，一个痛定思痛。
Now in the middle of your remorse and bitterness, you will repent.
我们才有耶利米哀歌的这样的篇章出来。
Then there was the lamentation that was born.
那个哀歌就在检讨为什么圣城被神来毁灭。
In Lamentations, you'll find out they examine themselves as to why the temple
那
was
他们
destroyed.
检讨的原因就是我们深深的犯罪得罪了神啊。
And then they finally came to a realization that they have sinned deeply against God.
所以我们看到神的这样评论。
So you see the critique of
他
God.
说我何时论到一邦一国？
He said, when did I judge upon the nation?
说要拔出拆毁毁坏。
And to uproot and destroy.
那我说的那一邦或那一国，
So the nation whom I've spoken of
若
earlier,
是转意离开他们的恶，
if they turn away from their evil,
我就必后悔。这后悔不是做错后悔，我们翻译的问题，我会 relent， 我会改变主意了。
then I will relent concerning.
那我就改变本来毁灭他们的原意，我就不毁灭他们。
Then I will change your mind originally destroying them
因
and
为
will not do it.
他们离开他们的恶
For they have departed from their sin.
所以从负面到正面。
So we can see that it goes from negative into a
那这个
positive
就有一个
aspect.
很明显的那个约拿书里头的尼尼微城做例子。
So from it, you could think about this clear example of the city of Nineveh.
本来耶利米这个尼尼微城的罪恶滔天啊，
Now originally, these people of Nineveh, they have sinned so much
那
in
神
relation to God.
为了毁灭他们以前，就叫约拿去传警告。
So before God destroyed the city, He sent Jonah to send a
那
warning message.
约拿说了说，在40天这个城就必倾覆。
So Jonah told them within 40 days the city will fall.
那城中的王宗主的王到的臣民，
So all the kings, starting from himself and to the
或
rest of
甚
the
至
people,
牛羊，他们都不让他们都不让他们喝水，
they fasted and did not drink.
全体禁食，
Everyone fasted.
坐在灰中痛悔，
They start in ask
而
and
且是
repent
离弃他们，抛弃他们手中所做的恶。
and to get rid of all the sin they had.
所以你可以看出，在约拿书3章10节那里，
So in book of Jonah chapter 3 and 10, you will
你就
see.
说神观看尼尼微城的人的作为，
Now originally God looked at what the Nineveh people have
看
done
他们离开手中的恶，
and witnessed how they have
而且
departed from
切
sin
切的真心祷告
and to
悔改
truly。pray and repented.
那么神就说，转意不将所要说的灾祸来降给他们。
Then he became relented and changed his mind of
所以
destroying.
这个是有幸的国家，
So they become a fortunate
就
nation,
从负面到正面，
which means they have turned from negative
从
into
那个
positive.
倾覆要拆毁，到了神要建立栽植。
From being destroyed to be the stage of being rebuilt and planted.
所以你怎么说呢？
So
我们
what
怎么
God
说
say?
呢？你说神要毁灭人就毁灭到底吗？
Can you really say that once God made up his mind, he would destroy it all the way?
但是恶人悔改呢？
What about the repentance
或者
of the
像
evil?
这个城邦尼尼微城能够弃绝手中的恶道呢？
What about city of Nineveh of once they forgot their sins?
神转意就改变他本来要毁灭他们的原旨。
God became relentant and changed his
我
original
们再
plan.
说以色列犹大，
What about King of Judah
或
and
者今
Israel
天的真耶稣教会，
and the Children's Church
我
today?
们要是没有很谨慎，
Today, if we're not
那我
careful,
们信仰就会变成只有躯壳的一个信仰，
then our faith has become a formality.
我们就变成一个形式化、世俗化、机械化的信徒。
We become a shell and we become
可
a
是
robotic
我们的
member
没有改正行为啊，
because we have not changed
我
our
们不
deeds.
断的在干犯神的诫命，
We continuously sin
我
against
们
his
还以为
commandments.
自由了，还以为平安了。
And for doing that, we feel we're safe and we're at peace.
而会指着圣殿说：“这是神的圣殿，这是神的圣殿，这是神的圣殿。
Point to the chapel, say, this is the chapel of ” God.
3次，就等于强调啊，是要强调，就说这是我们的，这是神的特殊的场所。
Some 3 times, which emphasize that we are really
我们所
confident.
夸口的，我们自豪的地方的，
This is something we're proud of.
但是这就是叫戒慎啊。
But that's also the time we need to
神
be careful.
何时论到一邦、一国，甚至一个人？那这时候假定他不按照神的律法来行的话，
Because every time when God spoke of a nation or a group of people or individual,
那神就会回转说：“我不祝福了，不配我祝福了。”
and depends on what this individual has done, God can change his mind and say, I will no longer
那就
bless.
利用外邦的势力，
And he will utilize the force of the
包括
foreigners.
有形无形的，
Whether it's something you can see
就
or
把
not,
这个信仰工程拆毁，
to destroy this work of faith.
那就涣散，散涣。
And you will be scattered.
那就意思就是说，已经再没有刚才所认为夸口的啊，这是神的百姓，这是神的百姓。
What that means is one no longer has this footstool to be prideful of I'm the people
或
of
是
God.
这是属灵的，我是属灵的，我是属真的。
Or to proclaim and shout I am spiritual.
神是看内心，看人的心灵诚实。
Today God looks at your honesty in your heart.
当年以色列民犯了这样大的错误，
Back then when the Israelites sinned against
这个
God,
错误仍是可以在历史上重演着
the。same mistake plays over and over in the
所以
history of
当我们
mankind.
看先知信息的时候，
So when you look at the message of the
已经
prophets,
看到以色列当代、犹大当代的那个意义，
you will find the meaning that was portrayed back in the
而
Judah
且
and
是
Israel
指
time.
向着我们不超越时间空间的普遍的真理。
It is also the truth that will not change despite of
那我
time.
们从神的评注里头，
So if you look at the commentary of God,
就说神他的绝对自主权
which you will see his sole sovereignty,
啊，他说要怜悯谁拣选谁，他就怜悯谁拣选
he
谁。
has the sole power to choose and have mercy on whoever he likes.
但是他所拣选的要是不配，
But if the ones he chose is
就好
not
像
worthy,
亚伯兰的子孙，
just like the descendants of Abraham,
他是照样被神丢弃，从外邦兴起亚伯兰的子孙，
history tells us they were forsaken and new descendant were raised from the
从
foreign.
石头兴起亚伯兰的子孙，
His descendants were raised from a
而不
rock,
是从血肉的亚伯兰的后裔来兴起来。
not from his bloody descendant.
所以这个给我们一个很大的反省：
So that gives a great warning.
神的绝对自主权，
The sovereign power of
他
God,
采取主动权哈。
he takes the initial action.
所以我们英文讲得很好 ，divine initiative。
He takes the initiative.
然后呢，要看着人间这个他的选民的一个反应了。
Then he will observe the reaction from men.
比如说他来，
For example, today we
他
come.
慈爱的呼唤，
We come because of his tender
他要
love.
救人，要爱你。
He loves you, that's why he
但
wants
你
to
有
save
自
you.
你有自主，你也有自由的意志。
But of course, you and I have
你
free
可以说
will.
不了，我才不了，我要走开了，
You can choose not to
或
come.
者采取相反的方向。
Then you will react differently.
那我神就说，我给你一套法律
Now God
律
said,
法，
I have given you this set of
那
rules.
借着法律跟你来订立契约，
That through this rule, me and I make a
就要像
covenant.
丈夫跟妻子戴上戒指婚约一样
Just like we have made this vow in our marriage.
啊。那这你就是要专一了，
That you need to be
要
faithful.
忠诚了。
Be faithful.
但没有想到你还抛媚眼，还勾引别人
But I never thought that you will have an affair
啊！
outside.
你不应该专一的爱真神，
Now you need to love your
因
God
为他是你
wholeheartedly.
的主，
For he's your
你的生命主，你的拣选主。
He's your king and he's your
那
God.
没有想到去拜偶像、拜巴力，随从外邦恶神
Think about worshiping other Baal or other gods.
啊，那神不会伤心吗？
Won't your God be sad?
所以我们在圣经上一个字眼叫做神是忌邪的神。
So one thing you'll see in the Bible that's emphasis over is our God and hates other idols.
忌邪的神，divine jealousy。
He's a jealousy God.
也就是说，他本来爱你，就是选你做妻子。
For example, which means originally he loves you. That's why he
订
chose
了
us to
约
be
了
his spouse, would make a
那
covenant.
可以享受鱼水和乐欢喜
Then
那
we
个
can enjoy
幸
his
福的
peace
生
and
活。
love.
但是没有想到去爱巴黎，
But less unexpectedly,
拜
we
偶
love
像，
other idols and
要去
Baal.
干犯神的律法，
We trespass
良
against
心道
commandments.
德亏欠神的公
We
义
have
原
fallen
则，
short of his moral
那怎么
standards.
办呢？
So
是
what
你
happens
破坏
next?
婚约呢？
Now you have broken this marriage
那就
vow.
所以说神就很悲伤，很记恨。
So he was sad and furious.
所以我们也看到忌邪的神要从这样的了解，从婚姻性爱的这种观点来了解。
So our God is one that hates evil and is jealous. So we need to understand this from the point of marriage.
那个一个西外发音叫卡纳 divine jealousy， 神是不希望你去拜偶像，你要独一真神，专一的爱他，守他的诫命。
So the original Hebrew word kana, which means God is a divine jealousy God. We need to get away from evil and to love Him,
所以
worship Him
那个
only.
原则今天还是适用的。
So the same principle applies today.
我们来看申命记
Turn to Deuteronomy.
其实为什么叫申命记？
So why is it called
因为
Deuteronomy?
它包含着3部分。
Because it has 3 aspects.
从第1章1节
From chapter 1 verse
到
1
4章43节
till 4:43.
是它第一部分，
That's the first segment,
就是说在复习在民数记、出埃及记、民数记，尤其那些历史。
which they recollect all the history that happened prior.
旷野行进的这样的漂泊的历史。
Of this history of which they have
那么
traveled
从
through the
4 章
wilderness.
14节
From chapter 14, verse 14,
到29章1节，
all the way till 29 verse 1.
这是第2大段，
This is the second
有关在
segment,
重新的申明神的诫命、律例典章，
which once again the commandments of God was reiterated to the
而且
people of God.
强调一点，
And one thing it
就是
was
说
really
神
emphasized
的律例和典章诫命和神的福气要给大家，
is the commandments of God and His blessings.
但是这不是说无条件的。
But of course, in order to receive all these,
那
there
说
will be circumstances.
简单说，神给你绝对自主权，也采动那主动权来给你拣选上的这个福气。
Because today God has taken an initial sovereign power to choose you.
但是你要怎么反应？
But what should your reaction be?
所以英文的第2个字就变成很重要的第2方面 ，human response。
So the human response became extremely important.
用什么心态，用什么作为来反应，来对应神？
How should your heart and your respond
就是
be?
信心跟顺服
It's submission and faith.
就是说你要 faithfully obedience，要信心的顺服。
So you need to be faithfully obedient.
那这样说来，福气就倾倒给你了。
So if you can do so, your blessings will arrive.
不但说可以进入这个迦南地，
Not only will enter into the land of
而
Canaan,
且凡事亨通，
everything you do will be smooth.
日子长久。
Your days will be long.
而且在旧约圣经里头，一个很重要的平安的契约，平安约，
Another peace covenant that was made in the Old
它
Testament.
是记载在利未记26章3节到13节那里。
It's recorded in Deuteronomy 20:26.
Leviticus
Leviticus 26.
那这样说来，就是你可以有天上降下合宜的雨，
That being said, you will receive rain from
你
heaven.
可以有五谷丰收，
You will become abounding in
你
your
可以
harvest.
躺在葡萄架下，从但到别是巴，很安然的居住，
From all the way from Dan to Bathsheba, you can lay and live in peace.
没有刀剑，
There will be no sword,
没有饥荒，
no famine,
没有这种瘟疫，
no pestilence,
没有恶兽。
and no hunger.
这样假定你这样的神安然居住，
So all these peace that
你
you
就
can
想到
receive,
神的恩典如此滚滚而
it
来，
reminds you of how much grace
你
God
就
has
会
poured
报
out.
恩，
Then you will be
你会
thankful.
谨慎。
You will be
那
watchful.
万一你要出去出征，这在圣经称为神圣的战争
Now, whenever you need to go out and fight for the Lord,
，Holy War
holy war,
这个圣战，
this is the
那你
holy
5个
war.
人可以打100个人，
Now, one of you can take
你
100
100个人可以
enemies.
胜过1万人，
One can overcome
因
thousands,
为神跟你同在。
for the Lord is with you.
不但如此，
Not only so,
到头来，
on the other end,
神的会幕、神的帐幕要在人间，跟百姓同
the
行，
tabernacle and rod of God will be with the
这个
people.
是很大的福气哦。
So that itself is a great
这是
blessing.
等于一个属灵的理想国的最后的实现哦。
This is like a spiritual utopia.
那这样说来，神说我要给你这个福气，
So God said, I will give you
但
such
是有一个
blessings
原则，
under one
因为
condition.
第3节很清楚说，
Because verse 3 it
刚才
says,
说的利未记26章，
Leviticus chapter
就说
23,
你
26,
若爱我，
those you love me,
你若谨慎的谨守遵行我的律例典章
if
诫命
you，follow and keep my
那
commandments and
这
words,
平安约的内容所描写的就给你了。
peace covenant we have talked about will be to you.
这是旧约时代。
This is the Old
那在
Testament.
主耶稣里头，神国的那个福气也是一样的。
So in us today, in Jesus, it's also the
你
same.
若听而遵守，有福了；
Today, those who are blessed when they listen
你
and
若
do.
听而去遵行，
If you listen and
就
observe,
好比聪明的工头把房子建造磐石上头，
just like the smart worker who has built a house on top of a
你不
rock,
怕风吹雨打太阳晒，
you will be not be
你的
afraid
信
of the rock,
仰根基稳固，
regards the rain and the sun.
因为你爱
Your
神，
faith
你
is
保守在
strong.
神的能力里头，
Because you love Him, therefore you
你
keep
不会
yourself
被
in Him.
倾倒。
Your faith will not be
万一
shaken.
你很像愚蠢的人，
Thus you be like a foolish
把
man.
自己信仰工程建立在这个磐石以外的这个河床沙土的河床
Now
上
you
头，
build this house on the sand.
那你风吹雨打太阳晒，
Now when the weather comes,
就倾覆的很厉害了。
it's very easy for your house
这
to
个是主耶
corrode.
稣利用当地的人文地文来描写我们
This is
人的
what
信仰。
Jesus utilized the natural phenomena to
所以
describe our faith.
那个重点在听而遵行，
So the key lies in you need
那
to
就得
listen
到
and
福
observe.
气，
By doing so,
得
you'll
到
be blessed.
信仰的稳固，
You will receive
那就
stability
得到
in
将
your
来
faith.
天上福气的
One
赏
day you will
赐。
have part in heaven.
那这样说来，这新旧约是一致的。
So that being said, the New and the Old
那
Testament
么在
actually
这
connect.
个申命记28章里头，
So in Deuteronomy chapter
请注意
28,
看那里啊，这前面讲福气，
so in the beginning, it talks about
那
blessing.
讲6对的福气以后，再一个注解诠释他前面所说的福气。
Talks about 6 pairs of blessings and summons up in one.
那后段就讲6对的这个咒诅，
And then you follow by 6 curses.
然后再有长篇的描写，就在细数或者说说明前面那大纲。
And you follow by a whole explanation of these 6 pairs
那
of
你
curses.
看这个祝福很清楚，
Now if you look at this blessing, it's very
就是你
clear.
遵守神的诫命、律例、典章的
If
话
you，observe the commandments of God,
反正刚才说了，灵肉方面的福气会临到的，
all these blessings will come to you, whether spiritual or carnal.
包括你的出入平安，包括你手中或者你家里头一切的箩筐了，什么都会得到祝福。
Which means everything you have will be blessed, and when you go in and out, you have peace.
那是先决条件。你若爱神，守他的命令。
So the prerequisite is you need to love Him and observe
那
His
后
commandments.
半段就很清楚。
So it follows very
反
clear.
之，也就是说，你假定不爱神，也是违背他的命令，
On the other hand, if you do not and fail to observe His
那以
commandments,
下的这咒诅就临到你了。
so these curses will follow.
哦，你看恶疾啦，
Hunger
恶疾那个 fatal disease，
Fatal
然后
disease
或者不能医治的那恶疮啦、烂疮啦，这种怪病啦，
or different kind of fatal diseases,
或者
sores,
说
and uncurable
田里头啦，
sickness.
或者这园里头啦，不能收成了。
Whether they have cannot produce crops in the
就是说
field,
美烂了、旱风了，然后这虫害了
famines or locusts or natural disasters.
啊。那再加上很重要的，就是说他们有敌人来围攻，
And on top of that, they were being attacked by the
君
enemies.
王要被掳去，包括这个就是预指的以约雅君王。
The kings and the people will be taken as slaves.
然后他们被掳放在这个列国当中，没有国家，没有
And
自己
they
的圣
will
殿，
scatter around other nations without
而
their
且
own
一个
kingdom.
很重要的字眼叫荒凉 （desolation），荒凉之字
So they will be desolated.
啊，这个是很大的咒诅，
This is a very
就
severe
是变
curse
得圣城荒凉废墟，
because the holy city has been desolated.
人口四散，
The people have been
那城邑
scattered.
犹大城镇都被敌人这强占掳掠，也是荒凉。
And the same thing happened to Judah.
所以刀剑、瘟疫，再来饥荒，刀剑、饥荒、瘟疫、恶兽到处都走动着。
So they could not stand against wars and famines and everything else.
那这个是实现在历史上的。
So all these happened in history.
那这样说来，我们得到一个很重要的一个道理：
So that being said, we have obtained a great truth.
为了让神来贯彻他的主动权，来拣选我们，祝福到底，
In order for God to follow on His sovereign chosen,
让
to
我
be
们在
blessed all
神
the
的
way,
手中要有一个盛器的一个器皿，
for us to finally become this vessel in His hand.
这个是贵重的、
This is a
合
precious
用
vessel,
合用的、
fit for work,
是圣洁的。
holy.
那神就把你放在大户人家里头。
Then God will place you in a rich
而
household
且就是善用这个器皿，
and to utilize you heavily.
那他就会祝福。
Then He will bless.
所以我们最后来看一段哈，这是我们要总结今天查考这神所给的这重要信息。
So lastly, let's read a verse.
申命记的30章，
Deuteronomy chapter
这也
30.
是申命记的第3段的最后一章了，
So this is the third phrase of Deuteronomy, also last chapter.
就是29章2节到30章的15节，
Chapter 29 to
到20
30,
节，
verse 20.
这是总结申命记的第3长篇，这个摩西的长篇演讲词。
Now here you'll find the conclusion of the third segment of Deuteronomy.
那个是摩西的长篇 speech，
This is a
讲到
long
此。
speech of Moses.
那注意看15节那里开始，
Let's read from verse 15.
这也今天对我们说的，
It's also telling us
我们就
today.
用转述的好了。15节说，神将生死祸福摆在我们面前，
So today I have set before you today the life, good, and death of evil.
吩咐我们爱神，谨守他的道，谨守他的命令，
And I
典章律
command
令。
you today to love the Lord and walk in His ways.
那有这样的前提的话，那你这样的效果，
By doing so, you will have this
你
follow.
人存活，你可以存活，
You shall live,
人数增多。
your days will be longer.
你在所承受的这个迦南地，就今天的神的恩典跟这个真理的地面上头，你可以得到福气。
Now, in terms of what you inherited, which means the blessing of God, you will have part in
那
it.
你假定转向离开神，
Now, else you decided to turn
去
away from
侍
the
奉
Lord,
别的神，
to serve other
那
gods,
你会灭亡。
you will
你
perish.
在得迦南做产业地的时候，日子不会长久。
Your days will not be prolonged when you cross over the Jordan.
所以
to
神就
possess.
说：“我呼天唤地的向你来做见证，向
That's
你来
why
呼求，
He said, I call heaven and earth as witness today
要
against you.
爱你的神，
You need to love your God
你要谨守他的诫命，
and keep His commandments.
那这些日子长久，被亨通。
Then you have prolonged days
那
and everything you do will be at
契
peace.
约上的福气就给你这样浇灌下来。
And all these peace that's recorded in the covenant will come
所以
on
查
you.
考这个是耶利米书18章，
So when we study Jeremiah
我
18,
们就在贯穿的这个犹大历史，
we need to connect all the history in the
我
kingdom of
们
Judah.
也查明了神在历史上的旨意，
Then we have studied the will of God
我
throughout
们
the
也
history of
明白
mankind.
了旧约神学的重点。
We come to an understanding of how He chooses
那个
people.
主题是，
And the main
我们
point
要
is
得神的祝福，
we need to receive His
我们要得到
blessing.
亨通长久，
Our days will be prolonged and our
那
ways
就要
will be at
让
peace.
神来保守，
And we have His guidance
不
and
要让神来
protections.
丢弃。
We do not want to be forsaken
那
by
意思就是
Him.
说，我们爱神，守他的诫命。
So do that. We need to love Him and keep
好，
His
我们
commandments.
唱诗228首。